Hi, my name is Simon Bennett. I'm the ZAP founder and project lead, and this is a series of training sessions about ZAP that I'm giving to the folks here at StackOrg. Now, in the last couple of sessions, I talked about Zest, and this is another session on Zest, but this time on client-side scripting. So hopefully you've seen that Zest is actually a pretty good kind of scripting macro type language for manipulating requests and responses. So it's very good for particular things, but there's sometimes when you find you can't do what you need to do just by changing the raw requests and replaying them. Sometimes you actually need a real browser. And luckily, Zest does support browsers, so you can launch browsers, you can control them. But you can have problems with this. And I had quite a few problems with preparing for this chat, and I will explain what they are as we go through. So I will share my screen. Hopefully you can now see ZAP. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some scripting against an application called OWASP JuiceShop, which is a really good application for if you want to learn about security. It's a great one to have a play around with. So what I want to do is actually do some authentication with JuiceShop, which I did cover, I think, in one of the workshops I've done before, not as part of this. So I'm actually going to create standalone scripts because they're kind of easier to see what's going on and to manipulate them. And what I'll actually do is just show you what JuiceShop looks like. So this is JuiceShop, and what I want to do is actually log in. First thing to do is create a new script, and this is the one I tried first. What I want to do is I tried to get the Google authentication working first because using a single sign-on has been quite good in the past. So Zest, and just want the default template. So the thing you need to know is that, well, as I've shown before, you just kind of right-click, and this is where you add the Zest statements. And most of the client-side stuff is under Add Zest Client. And you'll see most of them are actually disabled, apart from things like switch to frame, window handle, and launch. And that's what we want to do. So the first thing you need to do is you need to launch a browser. The handle is whatever you like, but this means you can actually cope with multiple browser windows open at the same time. We support a whole range of browsers, but I'm going to obviously stick with Firefox. By default, it comes up as headless, but because I'm going to play around and show you how you actually go about creating these things, I don't want it headless because I want to see what's going on. And I want to be able to inspect elements as well. But what I want to do is open JuiceShop, which is on port 3000. So if I save that, you'll see it says client launch Firefox, and the URL is going to open. And I will run that, and hopefully we'll get Firefox launched, and there we have JuiceShop. Now, first problem, we have this pop-up here saying welcome to JuiceShop, and this actually is a real pain for automation. And it took me, the first time I tried to automate JuiceShop, it took me quite a while. Just clicking on that dismiss button was actually very difficult. So I found a way around it. And this is a good example of the kind of things you've got to mess around with when you play around with client-side stuff. I found that what I want to do is I want to go to the login page. And so I found if I went directly there after opening the browser, then everything was okay. So what I want to do now is Zest Client, and I want to open URL. So here we've got a list of all of the window handles we know about, and there's only one. And we want to then open that URL, and I'll just close that. And then if I run that, we'll see that it gets launched, and we go straight to the login page. We go to the login page after the main page, and we don't have this dialog on top, which is good. So what I wanted to do first is actually show you logging in with Google. So I will go through the process to show you how far I got with this. So the first thing we want to do is we want to log in. We want to click on that button. Now there are various ways of clicking on buttons, and so what you can do is you can actually click on an element, but I found actually and we have various options. So you can actually have a CSS selector, class names, ID, link text, partial link text. These are all things supported by Selenium underneath. And I actually found the most reliable one was the ID. So these are things you generally have to play around with. So what we can do is we can go back to the browser, which I deliberately didn't close. And if you right click and inspect, then we should see down here button ID login button Google. So that seems like a good thing to try. So we'll save that and run it again. And with all these, whenever I'm creating a client-side Zest script, I always keep on just one statement at a time and make sure it's doing what you expect. And there you go. There you see we've now gone across to Google. We're actually accounts.google.com. So we now need to put in the email address. So let's have a look at that, and we'll see that the input ID is identifier ID, and then we want to click on next. So we will inspect that, and somewhere here there is a identifier next, so that should work. So we've clicked on something, so we now want to fill out a field. So in Selenium terms is sending keys. So we've got the same operation here, Zest statement. So again, we want the ID. We want to send keys to, and I've actually got an test account I created a while ago. So this is actually one I created for All Day DevOps. And this is something very similar to what I did then. And then we want to click on the next button. So again, this is clicking. So client, and click. We want the ID and identifier next. Save that, and we'll run that. And this is what I hit before. So this browser or app may not be secure. And my assumption is that is because I'm controlling this from Selenium. I haven't double checked on that, but this is a good example of the kind of issues you sometimes come across. This used to work. It doesn't work anymore because somebody, in this case Google, has made some changes. This is why client-side scripting, whether using Zest or anything else, can be painful. So that is kind of that's all as far as I got there. However, we do know that we can log into Juice Shop in other ways. So I'm going to go back, and what I'm going to do is try and actually, so if you have a look here, instead of using Google, we can actually just log in with the username and password. Now, the next thing I was going to try and do was actually register as a new customer using Zest client-side scripts. And this was okay until I got to this security question. And this pull down actually became a real pain to script, and I couldn't work out a way around it. However, if you remember in the last session with server-side scripting, I did actually register a user using the underlying requests. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to do the login and not the registration this time. So let me quit out of that, and I'm going to start a new script. And actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this a parameter. So I'm going to add the parameter name, and I will give it a value of test1 to start with, an initial value. And then I actually want to do a bit similar to before, so I do want to launch, and I want to launch Firefox, and I want to open that URL. So I can select them from the other script. I can copy those statements, and I can paste them here. But what I want to do now is, instead of going to the Google, so close that. So let's just run that again. This time I want to fill in the login details here. So we have a look at this element. We can see it's got an ID of email. So what we'll do now is Zest client send keys, the ID. And in this case, I want to use the name. So paste the name parameter and then at test.com. And next I want to put the password in. So again, we can inspect element here and we see the ID is password, which is all well and good. Actually, I can just copy and paste that, and then I want password. And in this case, I want test123. And then we want to click on this login button, which we can't see at the moment. We can't see until we put something in there. Then if we inspect again, we can see the ID is login button. Now, in some cases, you can actually use sometimes it's good to use the link text. In this case, I tried login before and that didn't work. So the ID in this particular case is more reliable. So client, and we just want to click ID. So if I close that window and then run that script, hopefully, yeah. So you can see we've got invalid email or password. And that is what I'm expecting because I haven't registered the user yet. But if you remember, we did actually create a script for registering a user last week. So that is the Zest Juice Shop register. And what you'll see is we actually had a parameter called name, coincidentally enough. And what we did is, you'll see we actually registered name at test.com and we used password of 123. So we already have this script for registering the user. So what I'm going to do is, in my form, before I actually launch Firefox, I'm going to do an action and I want to call the script, so which I've already showed you. And in this case, we want the Zest Juice Shop register. Don't think we need to add anything to the name. That's if the scripts return a value, then they can get assigned to a variable name if you want. And we want name equals, and we want the variable name. So this is actually a client-side Zest script, which is now invoking a server-side Zest script. I mean, I could have just copied those same statements. It doesn't matter. Zest doesn't really care whether it's, there's no, as far as Zest is concerned, it doesn't matter whether it's client-side, server-side, or both. You can mix and match as you like. So what I'll do now is run that, and hopefully we now log in. So what we have done is we use the previous Zest script to actually register the user on the fly, and then now we have authenticated. So if you have an authentication process that absolutely requires a browser, then this is something that you can do using Zest client-side scripts. Now, these can get complicated and you can do some really fun things. Now, I don't actually have a good example that I can show you live, but one of the examples I created before is the persona script, which I'll walk you through now because it's quite fun. So this script was a script that I created when I was testing Mozilla Persona. So Persona was a single sign-on service from Mozilla, and I found that I was actually testing a different site for Mozilla, and I found that I could actually put any characters in the username for that particular service, but it would only accept accounts registered with Persona, and once you'd set the username, you couldn't actually change it. So I had to create a new Persona account every single time I wanted to test a payload for the username for this application, which I wasn't going to do manually. So I used a Zest script, and what I'll do is I'll kind of walk you through it to show you that it's not, hopefully not too difficult to understand. So first of all, we've got a comment about registering a new Mailinator account. So first of all, so we launch browser pointing at login.persona.org. Now this site doesn't exist anymore, so it won't work. But I have a video which I'll show you after this. Then we click on an element, and partial link text is sign in. So here we're looking for an element, the text of a link. And what we then do is we assign a random number to RND, and then we create so we assign name to ZAP persona random number, and then we create an email, which is that username at mailinator.com. So because we've clicked on that link, that will actually launch a new window with Persona. And this is where we grab a handle to it. So the URL would have been this URL, login.persona.org/signin, would have been launched new browser window. So here we use a client window handle action, and we assign that to login. So we can now start working on that browser window. Then we send so the first thing it asked for was the email. Then you had to submit that screen. Then you had to send the password and confirm the password. I used email both times, same email, and then you had to submit it. Then what this script does, it sleeps for 2 seconds and then launches a new window pointing at Mailinator. And so then for 20 times, we basically loop looking for a client element. So we're looking for any link which has Persona in it. Then if we do find it, then we click on it. Otherwise, we break. And if we do, we break. So that break takes us out of the loop. So we have a set of controls that we can, things like break and next, which we can put on, and continue, which we can use for loops. Otherwise, we sleep for a second. So basically, we're sitting here waiting for this email to come through, because obviously the email isn't guaranteed to come through immediately. Then we need to switch back to so for some reason, actually I should switch back to the Mailinator frame. Not sure why, but that's how it worked. You had to play with these things. And then I clicked on the link saying confirm your email address. And that did everything. And then basically I went back to it launched a new window, taking back to Persona to verify the email address and putting in the password again. So that's a fairly complicated Zest script, but what it's doing, it's registering a new account with a service, .com, and going to Mailinator and automatically clicking on it. So this is actually on YouTube. So I'll just play this for you now. And basically, that was the script. So running the script, going to login.persona.org, we're going to click on sign in. We get the pop-up box, put in the email address, click on next, put in the 2 passwords. Now we've got this, there's been an email sent. So we open up we open up Mailinator, then we wait and they saw the email come in. We click on that and then we click on the confirm your account. Then we go back to Persona and we get this last step thing and we confirm the email address. And so that that was that script running. And basically that allowed me to create new users on this account, on this service, and then I just put a loop. I created another script, loops around that. So as I was saying, this allowed me to actually set a new payload per new account. And I actually didn't find any vulnerabilities. I was hoping to find cross-site scripting, but at least I was able to go back to the team and said, actually, you're doing well, but I still don't recommend you allow any characters in the username. So that is an example of a more complex client-side script and the kind of things you can do. But I do stress these things, any client-side scripting is fragile. If anything changes, if any of the links change, or the technologies change, or if people put things in place to stop you doing stuff, then they can break. So that is the main thing I was going to talk about with client-side scripting. I will quickly kind of go through the different, just run through all of the options you have on Zest scripts again. So obviously these are kind of remove and duplicate scripts. These are kind of standard script things. The add request allows you to add the kind of server-side request where you just specify everything in the request, including headers. Then I didn't show the scan action. Now this is one which is actually not supported by the Zest underlying library, because this is kind of essentially a hook that tools can provide. So Zest doesn't have any capabilities for scanning, but it does actually allow tools to extend that. So ZAP implements this, so you can actually use the ZAP active scan. That's what this invokes. So this is very much for reproducing security vulnerabilities. But it's not as controllable as you can do via the other ZAP dialogues. The script, option allows you to run another script, and that can be a Zest script or it can be any other script that ZAP knows about. And for the underlying Zest library, it can be absolutely anything. It will just find it on file store if it's there. Print, that's just printing something out to the console. Fail, we saw when creating the passive and active scan rules. Sleep, which I mentioned before, it just sleeps, waiting for things. And we've seen the global variable set and remove, which I mentioned before. So I've talked about some of the client-side ones. Launch, obviously, this is where you launch the browser. Then you can assign things to cookies. You can click on elements, send keys, which are essentially sending text. You can submit elements. You can clear them. You can assign things from elements. You take screenshots, and that will then save to file store. Switch to frames. So if something, so if you need to switch to different frames, you can do that. If different windows get launched, then this is how you can grab hold of those handles, those windows, and you can close windows, which is good, because otherwise they litter your desktop. And again, you can open URLs in existing windows, which I did before. With Zest conditionals, we've got things like doing regexes equals length is integer, status code, response time URL, where the client-side element exists, and so it's a client-side one, and these kind of empty and nulls, which you then put other elements underneath. Then we've got loops, so you can loop through a set of strings that you specify in the statement, loop through a file where we've got every payload in that file, one per line, loop through integers, so you just specify the high and low values and step. Client elements, so you can actually loop through elements in the client side again. So if you've launched a browser, you can loop through those elements if you want to click on everything in a list or something. And regex expressions as well. You can add comments, which you've seen before, and controls. So in this case, we only have a return here, but we can also have things like break if I right-clicked within a loop. And actually, if I go down and if I click on one here, one thing you might have not seen is we can actually comment statements as well. So if you actually want to comment leave some statements in there but not use them, just right click and click on comment, and you'll see they are actually grayed out now. So that will run, but those statements will be ignored. And then you can right click and uncomment them as well. And if you click on statements, then you can surround anything with loops or with conditional statements as well. So that is a quick run through of all of the Zest statements. And that is pretty much everything I was going to show you for Zest, both in this session and yeah, I've not got any other Zest sessions planned. Is there anything else? Yep. So I mean, one thing I can show you here is the summary, which you've probably seen a few times. So the prefix here, this actually just means everything. And so this actually allows you to change things. So if you have a prefix, if you use a prefix, then you can actually go in and change that for the whole script if you want to run this against, test it in staging and then run it against stage or something like that. You can change the URL everywhere. Parameters we've seen. Authentication, so this just allows you to do basically your standard HTTP auth, and then the default assertions, which I've shown you before, which is all the default assertions that get added when you record Zest scripts. I'll actually show you the code for all of this stuff, and there are actually two different repositories that you need to worry about or when you talk about Zest scripts. So the first one is in a repository called Zest. This used to be in one of the Mozilla repositories, but it's now been transferred to ZAP. This is Zest, and this is the standalone version of Zest. So this will run from the command line, and all the code is down here as you would expect. So we have kind of the interface there, and then we have all the implementation here. And there is actually some information in the wiki. It could be better, but it does. There are some things about command lines and some of the conditionals and things like this. So if you want to learn more, this is probably your best bet for learning about Zest generally. Then the ZAP specific side. So we have a Zest add-on in ZAP, and like most add-ons, it is in ZAP extensions. And under add-ons, and it'll be right down at the end. So Zest is down here, and so all of the code will be underneath here. And actually what we have, if I show you the templates that we've got. So in general, all scripting languages support all different script types, but Zest is the exception because Zest has to know how to integrate with particular script types. So we only support Zest scripts if we have a template. So we only support ZAP scripts if we have a template for them. So as you can see, we actually support active, authentication, HTTP sender, passive, proxy, standalone, and targeted scripts. If we want to support any others, we have to add a template. And that template helps us map from what ZAP understands to what Zest understands. But then if I go back here, we will see that all of the code is underneath here, and you'll see we've got different directories so all the dialogues have separate classes and things like that. And I will actually mention another repo which I think I've mentioned before, and that's the community scripts repo. And this is a whole set of community scripts. As you can see, these are all different script types we've got, so we've got quite a few. And we've got scripts in there for all of the different scripting languages. But there are some Zest scripts in here, as well as ones we've written in JavaScript and Python and Ruby and all the other scripting languages we support. So that is all I was going to talk to you about Zest. So if you're watching this after the event on YouTube and you have any questions, then please just ask any questions you've got in the comment section. Thank you very much, and I will see you for the next session.